Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter, oof, that name hurts, is the second highest rated episode of Game of Thrones on IMDb, and for a lot of people, is their favorite episode. I even counted myself in that group until I, stopped and thought about it for 2 seconds and went, wait, none of this episode actually makes any sense. Albeit it took me a few years reading the book and realizing that, oh, none of the logic of this episode is logicking. Really though, if you pause and think about the huge plot points from this episode and think of how does this logically make sense within the grander scheme of the story, there's some big holes all of a sudden. The big one, of course, being the blowing up of the sept by yours truly over there. Because if we remember, Cersei is trying to avoid her trial by combat. She does not want to go have this trial. She knows she's going to lose. She knows she's going to be back in the clutches of the Faith Militant and the High Sparrow. So she's going to do everything that she can to avoid this. Naturally, that includes blowing up the Vatican, but fantasy. Before anyone jumps down my throat, I'm not arguing that Cersei isn't crazy enough to, try to pull something like this. I would say I think she's only crazy enough to do it in the book. The show, I don't think, sets her up with the same degree, but I will digress. But it's not so much that Cersei blows it up that I have an issue with, but the aftermath of it. Because Cersei blows up the Sept of Baelor with, a couple of the largest families in the kingdom inside of it, as well as the High Septon and a lot of the Faith Militant, and then isn't punished for it. No. In fact, she isn't punished at all. She gets to crown herself queen. And I'm sorry, but as cool as this moment is, and as hard as that soundtrack hits, believe me, it does not make sense. Because say that Cersei did blow up the Sept of Baelor, which hasn't happened in the books, but maybe it will. But if she did that, she would not be rewarded for it, not at all. And there is no feasible way that she would be able to crown herself in the aftermath of it. Because remember the context of which this is all happening, at the time. The Faith Militant is resurgent in the country. The High Sparrow has ascended to the rank of High Septon. He is in charge of the Faith of the Seventh, the largest and most common faith in all of Westeros. And because of that, because of this particular High Septon's religious zeal, there is a revival of a very conservative religious fervor in the country. The fact that the Faith Militant exists at all is crazy and, a sign of this, gaining of steam from this, very, very extreme religious movement that has basically infiltrated the regular Faith of the Seven, which at this point had become, a little corrupt, a little, underhanded. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. But all of that's gone now because they have cleansed it of everything. So if this is the current environment that the events of the show and, the books are taking place within, there's, a lot of crazy religious fervor in the streets. And if someone were to attack the faith, they would be seen as an enemy. Because remember, Cersei is not ruling, if she were to rule, over an empty city. She is ruling a giant city, one of the biggest in Westeros, with millions of people in it who are all, for lack of a better word, poor, uneducated, and extremely devout religious people. And uprisings in King's Landing are not a new thing. They happen. They happen with some frequency. So say if there was a crazy person who went ahead and blew up the biggest symbol of their religion, their direct connection to their very real gods, I don't think the majority of the population would be chill with that. So say after, Cersei has blown up the Tyrells, religion itself, and whoever and whatever else was in there, say after all of that, yeah, she has enough Lannister troops who are loyal to her to somehow, crown herself queen, even though there is no precedent for her to do that. She, has no right to the throne at all. And if you want to claim it's conquest, okay, well, let's see how long you hold it. Because again, if she had the troops to be able to accomplish the bit of putting the crown on her head, cool. The entire city is now going to rise up against you, and you don't have enough troops, even with all of the Lannister guards, household guard, whatever. Even if you have some of their army there, that and the city watch isn't going to be enough if the entire populace of King's Landing is rising up. Not to mention, if one person randomly, blew up the fantasy Vatican and then took the throne, all of the other regions, in the country, would freak out and target her specifically. Which a lot of them do in the show. I will give them, we have a lot of people suddenly go over to Daenerys, and that makes some logical sense, but, we don't get everyone. the Stormlands, the Crownlands, the Vale, like, none of them would be chill with this. But seemingly, because Cersei exists in a vacuum and rules over, I guess, an empty city, she's able to crown herself just because she felt like it. And then beyond the whole, Sept and Cersei mess, we have Dany finally leaving Meereen and heading to Westeros, except, but you didn't complete your mission. Because remember, at this point, Dany has stayed there. She has stayed there as long as she has because her greatest concern, which I think is actually her real greatest concern, is slavery and her desire to abolish it. And that's why, she gets stuck in Slaver's Bay for so long, is because, she goes from city to city, frees a bunch of these people, and then realizes that the systems set up around them are just going to put them back into slavery the second that she is gone. And so that is why she's there. She's trying to figure out, how do I keep these people safe, because these are the people that I actually care about. But in the show, it's oh no, well, she kills the current group of bad guys who were there, and she institutes another council or whatever, leaves the second sons to take care of everything, which sure, the mercenary group, they're gonna be good leaders, cool. And even if there's a council outside of that, that's what she did in Astapor, and it got overthrown immediately. So essentially, Dany just leaves Meereen because she gets bored of it, which I know if you don't like Dany in the TV show, you're yeah, that logic makes sense, but it doesn't, because she has drives, she has goals, and she has stayed there for multiple seasons for a very specific one that she suddenly just forgets about because, the pointy chair is calling to me. I can also go into all of this mess and how they, did some big reveals, even though they didn't get revealed to the person who would actually matter to, and then a lot of the implications of it are never really fully explored again. Prince who was promised, Azor Ahai, no, we don't care. Okay, cool. But my general point is, there are a lot of incredible set pieces in this episode, which spectacle-wise are mind-blowing. I remember watching this and losing my shit. I thought this was incredible. This was the coolest thing I've ever seen. People, all the backstabbing, all the deaths, all happening so quickly and successively in one episode. Oh, it's too much. But the thing when you have those huge set pieces, those big deaths, is they have implications. There is a chain of events, there's a butterfly effect that happens from when you do that, which is the entire point of A Song of Ice and Fire, of Game of Thrones. Think back to the early seasons. The big important deaths are what, caused all of the events of the series to happen. Robert dying, before him, the Mad King, after the Red Wedding. All of these things have butterfly effects that have huge ramifications going forward. And this episode has the giant deaths, has the huge, scene-changing things, and none of them affect Jack squat. But hey, the soundtrack slaps. Okay, goodbye.